Thank you for joining us for this week's message at Crosswind Church. If you have any questions about this message or about Crosswind Church, please visit us at www.crosswindchurch.net, or you can email us at info@crosswindchurch.net.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Jeremy, and I'm the pastor here. I'm so glad that you're here and that you get to be a part of Be Rich, an ongoing wave of generosity that we're trying to unleash in our community over the next few weeks. I need to tell you about two things before we dive into some more new stuff. First of all, if you are still wanting to be a part of Give, how about that number? Over $25,000 you guys gave in a week. That's remarkable. And that, 100% of that is going to go to some great organizations all over Northwest Tennessee. We're going to try to refinish the gym floor and redo a rec room, and we're going to build fences. Literally, we're going to build a fence, and so many other things we're going to do with all that money. And we want you. There's still time for you to participate. There's still time for you to get involved and to participate in giving that. Like Rachel said, $39.95. You can give on the app. We're trying to do that. $39.95 for every man, woman, and child that comes through our church. And we said if you can give more, add a zero, add 2 zeros. That's totally cool. If you can't quite do all that, you need to do a little less. That's cool too. We just want you to be a part of it, so that when we go and pass out some checks in a couple weeks, like you get to celebrate with us. Now, the next thing I wanted to tell you about is something that's it's actually a fast forward to next week. Next week we're going to do the Love Week, L-O-V-E, love, and we'll tell you a lot more ways that you can love on your community next week. But one way you need to prepare. You need to come prepared next week. Over on either side of our sanctuary, we have a table with green bags on them. Okay, those green bags have printed on the bag a list of needed supplies for the Obion County Backpack Program. If you're not familiar with this, this is feeding hungry kids over the weekends and over breaks when they're not getting lunch and breakfast at school. There are actually kids in our community that do not get food to eat over the weekends. And so these bags you fill the bag up with some or all of the things you see on the list. Maybe you need to get multiple bags and then bring them back next week. Last year, we raised 1,000 pounds of food that we gave to the Union City Backpack Program. This year, we want to raise even more to give the county program. Okay, sound good? All right, so let's feed some hungry kids, get those bags. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about Be Rich. If you're a guest with us, you're not too late to get involved in all of this, but I need to kind of tell you where it's going, because I'm not going to tell you over the next 30 minutes or so how to be rich, or how to get rich, I'm not going to tell you that we want to make Crosswind Church rich. I'm not going to tell you if you just have enough faith, God will make you healthy, wealthy, wise, and beautiful. That's not what this series is about. This series is based on a verse found in 1 Timothy. I want to read it to you. Paul is writing to a guy named Timothy, and he says this: "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them," he says, "to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and be generous and willing to share." And so that's what we're doing. We're practicing being rich. So you don't feel rich, that's cool. We're practicing being rich over the next few weeks, and we're giving you an opportunity to give, serve, and love. And the goal is to unleash a wave of generosity, no strings attached generosity, into our community, because that's what we think loving the way that God has loved us looks like. Okay? So today it's really, really cool that we get to do the Serve Week on the week that we get to talk about veterans as well, right? So Rachel told you 11/11 is when World War I ended, and it was originally called Armistice Day. You may know that. It was to celebrate peace in the world. And then in the 50s, we had a World War II vet that said, hey, we want to celebrate all veterans, and so some legislation was passed and Veterans Day was formed, and that's what we celebrate today. I have veterans in my family. It means so much to me to get to celebrate them. My grandpa served in Vietnam and on a Navy destroyer. That was what he did. And then we have a kind of an adopted grandfather, Chester Thomas, who served also in the military. Richard Anderson, my father-in-law, served in the National Guard. And so we get to celebrate all of those veterans. They mean so much to me. What's interesting to me is they go and they serve and they fight to protect freedoms and to protect the rights of individuals that they believe they have. They believe those rights that were given to them weren't given to them by a government, and those rights weren't given to them by a constitution. Those rights were given to them by God. In fact, we think this idea about going and fighting for liberty and fighting for rights and fighting for justice, we think that is kind of like a uniquely American kind of value, but you realize that it's actually kind of a holdover. It's a uniquely Judeo-Christian kind of value. It's a Jesus kind of value that we have, because we believe that the rights weren't given to us by a constitution, but given to us by God himself. And so when we celebrate veterans, we celebrate serving, they're fighting for a value that's uniquely Christian. Because when Jesus came into the world, life didn't have very much value. And God, or the gods, certainly didn't care much about human beings. In fact, if we go back and we read about all kinds of world religions that existed when Jesus was born, and even some world religions that exist today, what we see is that if there was a God or gods, they didn't care about humanity. They weren't out for humanity's best interest. Humanity and human beings were just toys that the gods played with, right? They would come down from Mount Olympus, they would come down from wherever it was they came down from, and they would kind of mess with us, right? In some cases, they'd have children with them. In some cases, they would kind of put them in really crazy predicaments and circumstances and see if they could work their way out. And they were just dispensable. The gods didn't care about human beings. Human beings were just kind of a plaything of the gods. And so when Jesus comes along and he says something like, God loves you and God cares about you, in the ancient world that was so foreign. That was not something that anybody really understood or even dealt with at that particular time in human history. To make matters worse, we see that the value of human life was nothing. No one valued human life in that particular day and age. So, for instance, slavery was not just something that was accepted in society; it was expected in society. You realize that you weren't necessarily a slave because of your ethnicity. You could be, but that wasn't the only reason. You weren't necessarily a slave because of the color of your skin. You could be, but that wasn't the only reason. It wasn't just because of socioeconomic reasons. It was for all sorts of reasons that you could become a slave. And no one in the ancient world was immune from potentially becoming a slave. I want you to wrap your heads around this. In the ancient world, you were one or two decisions away, or one or two events away from becoming a slave yourself. If the village that you lived in was if they were attacked by a local village, another village, and you were kind of conquered, then they could take you, they could take your children and sell you off into slavery, or force you into slavery in their village. Like that was how things kind of worked. If you incurred too much debt that you couldn't pay back, then you could get, in fact, sold into slavery as well, or have to be given into slavery to pay back the debt. They can literally come and take your children and make your children their slave. Humanity had zero value. That idea that slavery was expected part of society just devalued humanity. As a result, human life has no value. We talked last week about how babies that were unwanted or that were born with defects, right? They could be put to death. They could be left out to exposure, to freeze to death, or to be killed by wild animals, or to drown in the river. Like this was the type of society that Jesus was born into. And then Jesus shows up and he flips everything on its head. Jesus shows up and he goes, listen, I know the world you live in, but there's a God that loves you, and he has better for us, and you have value. And that value, it's not given to you by government, it's not given to you by your amount of wealth, it's not given to you by the family you're born into. That value is given because you are made in the image of God. He has ascribed value to you. The problem is, I was thinking about this, 2,000 plus years later, right? In a world that seems so far removed from the world that Jesus was born into, it's so easy for us to still get this backwards, isn't it? It's so easy for us to not ascribe value to people, especially when they're different from us. And so today, as we lean into the serve part of Be Rich, I wanted to look at a passage of Scripture, and we looked at it last year, but I think, I'll tell you why I want to look at it again in just a minute. I want to take a look at a passage of Scripture, and I want to see if we can kind of reorient ourselves and refocus ourselves on what it means to have value that's given to us by God Himself, and what Jesus had to say about how we should treat those people that are around us. Sound good? So we're going to read from Jesus' most famous speech he ever gave. His most famous sermon. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. And it's recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, 6, and 7. And we're going to start reading in Matthew chapter 5 and see just exactly what Jesus has to say about this. I'm going to pick up in verse 42. And for those that are new to Crosswind, we're going to read a little bit and talk a little bit, read a little bit, talk a little bit. We're going to work our way through this over the next few minutes. Verse 42, Jesus says this: "Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow you." Now, this is a problem for me personally. I don't want to impress any of my problems on you, but I just think it might be something that we all kind of struggle with, because I really like my stuff, right? Like, I really like the things that I have. And I like my bank account. And I like the fact that I have some money in my bank account. There's a little bit of a cushion there, and I kind of know where that is and what I can do with it and how I can do it and how I can manage my stuff so that I have a secure future and so everything is good. And what Jesus says is, listen, there's going to be people that come to you, and they're going to want to borrow from you, and they're going to want to take from you. And when that happens, Jesus says, here's what I want you to do. It's so simple. Just give it to them. And the problem that I have with that is that I like giving to people that are going to give back to me. I like giving to people that are going to give back to me. So I want what's called a return on investment. I'm looking for ROI, baby. Right? Like, I want to know, if I give it back to you, are you going to give something back to me? Are you going to pay me back with interest? Are you going to then, in fact, return something to me in favor? If I need something from you, are you going to give that to me later? I'll scratch my back. I'll scratch your back. You scratch mine, right? I get it right just a minute, right? You know that what I'm talking about? And last week, if you remember, what we talked about is that Jesus taught us that when we give, we should give to the person that can't repay us back. When we give to the person, we should give in such a way that we don't expect any kind of return on investment. And the struggle is that sometimes we want that. In fact, in our heart of hearts, that's exactly what we want. We want money back, or we want a life to be changed. We want somebody to be better because we give that money. And Jesus says, listen, if somebody asks, give it. If somebody needs, give it, right? If somebody wants, just go ahead and pass that along. And that is such a struggle for people like me. Maybe it's a struggle for you. He goes on and says this, you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Thank you. Thank you. How sweet. All right. You've heard that it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Now, the thing about this is this. Jesus is talking to a bunch of Jews, and they understood the Old Testament, and they had memorized large portions of the Old Testament. And we can go back and we can read the Old Testament, and we can find time after time after time after time where Jesus said, or where God says to the Israelites that you should love your neighbor. Now, some of the Jews have tried to get around that a little way. They tried to figure out who's my neighbor and who can I love and who do I not have to love, that sort of stuff. Jesus goes, I need you to love your neighbor. And then there's a second part where he says, and hate your enemy. Now, you want to know the problem with this? Is that nowhere does God command you to hate anyone. We don't see that anywhere. Love your neighbor, we find throughout the Scriptures. But when it comes to hating your enemy, no. That's something that had just become a part of the culture in which people lived. And you want to know what's interesting? It's become a part of our culture as well. Do you realize that we live in a culture that makes it so easy to hate people? So easy to hate other people. I want to give you some examples. Like some of the music that we listen to, you understand? We'll have language in it that speaks of hate of other people. And it could be, some musician, dropping a diss track to some other musician. Like, maybe that's the case. But I'm saying, like, if you listen to music that calls someone else a racial slur, whether you have that same race or not, you realize that devalues humanity and it describes hate. If you listen to music that calls a woman a female dog or a whore, you're devaluing her humanity. And it teaches you on some level that hate is okay, right? If you look at someone across the political aisle and it's us or it's them and it's you're for us or you're against us or whatever it is, it becomes so easy not just to disagree, but to hate and to scream that hate. And we look at people for different reasons, be it the color of their skin or their socioeconomic level or the side of the political aisle they fall on or the way that they live their life or the things that they believe, whatever it may be, it is so easy for us to hate. And right now we know that there are world religions that look at those of us that follow Christ and they hate us. And it just seems so natural for us just to hate them back. And if we aren't careful, it's so important, if we aren't careful, we'll fall into the same trap that Jews in Jesus' day fell into, where they realize or they believe that it's okay to love your neighbor and hate your enemy. The problem is, as Jesus is getting ready to point out, nowhere does God tell us to hate anyone. Nowhere does God tell us to hate anyone. He then follows up chapter 5, verse 44. I love this. He says this, but I tell you, right? Now, we have no idea how offensive this was to the Jews who heard this. Like, we have no idea, right? What Jesus is basically saying is this. Listen, I know from the time you were little until now, you've sat under teachers and you've gone to synagogues and you've heard a certain thing and you've memorized a certain thing and you've been taught a certain thing. But I say, right? It's just so incredibly offensive to the Jews that are hearing this. Well, what right do you have, Jesus, to tell us that what you say is different? But what he's getting at is this. I need you to understand that what it is that you are learning and have learned, that is not what it is that God wants you to learn. You have misunderstood, misinterpreted, misapplied. And for what the Jews it meant is that they were going to have to deconstruct their faith and deconstruct their teaching that they had learned and then reconstruct it in a new God-centered Jesus economy that he was ushering in the first century. But I tell you, and then he says this, I want you to love your enemies. What? That doesn't make any sense. But see, Jesus, it's implied in the name, enemy. That means I don't have to love them because they're different from me. Because they have it out for me. They don't believe in the same values that I believe in, Jesus. They don't vote the same way that I do. They look different, sound different, act different, smell differently than I do. Jesus, surely you don't mean that we should love our enemy. I'll tell you about a conversation we have with our girls on a regular basis. And when I tell you this, it's not because I think as a parent we're getting it right. I feel like we get it wrong more than we get it right. This is a value we're trying to instill in our daughters as often as we possibly can. And it's this phrase, these four little words. Everyone has a story. Everybody has a story. We tell them that all the time. And so when they come home from school and they say things like, listen, so-and-so said this or did this and they're causing this fight and I got two girls, so there's drama all over the place, right? And she didn't invite me, he didn't invite me, he asked me and she didn't ask me and whatever it is. And it just kind of gets really weird. And every now and then our daughters get really distraught and they'll come home because there's someone there that has hurt them in some way. And we sit them down and we talk through that whenever that happens, whenever they're willing to do that. But we always try to remind them, everyone has a story. Do you want to know the second sentence that is? Everything that a person does makes perfect sense to them in that moment. Everything that a person does makes perfect sense to them in that moment. Now, don't misunderstand me. It may be the wrong thing. It may be something that's totally destructive to them. It may destroy their lives and other lives and the lives of everyone that's around them. I'm not trying to say that it's the right thing. I'm just saying that in that moment, based on their story, where they've been, what they've experienced, how they've done, that it makes sense to them. When they say what they say, when they do what they do, on some level in their brain, they went, this sounds like a good idea. It may not have been a good idea. But because they have a story, and when we go into that with that kind of empathy, then we recognize that just because they may be our enemy or out to get us, it doesn't mean that they don't have a story. And so what we want to try to teach our girls is that we want to give you some grace. We want to give some grace. We want to give some empathy. We want to give some sympathy when that occurs. And do you want to know why it's an important lesson for us to teach our girls and why it's an important lesson for y'all to know? It's because that's what you want from other people. When you do something and somebody goes, why in the world did you do that? You want them to go, but if you knew my story, Jeremy, if you just knew where I'd come from, if you just knew where I've been, at that moment it made perfect sense to me. And Jesus says, I just need you to understand something. When you start loving your enemy, it's not saying that they're right. It's not saying that I need to change my value system to match theirs. That's not what you're saying. You're just going, you know what? I know they've got a story. And so what if instead of hating, what if instead of passing judgment, what if we said, hey, can we have a talk? Can we have a conversation? Can we sit down together? Right? I want to hear why you did what you did. And I want to know what's going on in your life that's led you down this pathway. What if you invited them to dinner and just sat down across the table from them and said, man, how can I pray for you? How can I serve and give back to you? Do you know what we'll learn if we start doing that? If we start loving our neighbor in that way, do you want to know what we'll learn? We'll learn this. We'll learn that people are really hard to hate close up. It's easy to hate somebody when it's them. It's easy to hate somebody when it's a faceless mob. But when you get up close with somebody and you listen to their story, you may not agree. In fact, you probably won't. But people are really hard to hate close up. Right? This is such a big deal. He goes on and he says, I want you to love your enemies and I want you to pray for those who persecute you. You want me to do what? Pray for them? Do you know why this is so hard for us as 21st century Christians? It's because we don't even pray for the people we like. You barely pray for your family. Right? Maybe a couple friends. Come on. Let's just be real. Right? So when Jesus says, I want you to pray for your enemies, you're like, listen, I'm not even that good at praying for my wife. I'm I'm not even that good at praying for my kids. And now you're telling me to pray for my enemies? Jesus, that just absolutely doesn't make any sense. When I was real little, kind of growing up, I was small in stature. Not much has changed. I was a little guy growing up, and so I got made fun of all the time. I was small, short in stature. I was a little bit socially awkward, and so like things just were not good for me in elementary school. Middle school was not good either. It was a little bit better. My popularity peaked in the 8th grade. But regardless of that, I just was not a super cool kind of guy. People kind of made fun of me. I heard every short joke. If you come up to me after church and make a short joke, I'm like, yeah, okay, I've heard that. That's fine. Okay, anyway. And I would come home sometimes, my feelings really hurt because there are some people that were just relentless, right? And sometimes the bullying got physical because I was smaller, so they didn't think I could fight. They were right, but they didn't think I could fight. And so they'd kind of pick on me a little bit, and I would come home and I'd be distraught. And my mom, she would tell me this from a young age. She would say, listen, what I need you to do, Jeremy, is I need you to pray for that person. Pray for that person. And as a kid, it just got instilled in me that when someone is against me or they want to harm me in some way, I'm going to pray for that person. It's funny that it's something that's so natural for us to teach children about bullies, but what in the world would it look like if you started praying for that boss that has it out for you? What would it look like if you started praying, right, for that coworker that's trying to undermine things and play that political game at the office, and you just instead of just trying to fight back or pay them back for what they're doing, I'm just gonna start praying for them. What would it look like if you started praying for your mom or dad who you're convinced have it out for you? Or pray for your sister or your brother that every day they seem to try to be undermining what it is you're trying to do. Pray for that teacher that no matter what you do, it's not good enough. Pray for that bully. Pray for ISIS. Pray for that Democrat. Pray for that Republican. How about you pray for Donald Trump? How about you pray for Chuck Schumer? How about you pray for Nancy Pelosi? Oh, it's tough, isn't it? Come on. Not Nancy Pelosi. I'm talking about any of them. I just made a political statement. Didn't mean to. You laugh because listen, it's a little awkward, isn't it? It's a little tough, isn't it? Pick your side out. It doesn't matter. Pray for the other. See, here's the thing about prayer. It will not change their mind, but it'll change your heart. It may not change them. Probably won't. But it'll change the way that you view them. Now, this is such a big deal for me. Such a big deal for me. I need you to understand that I have a master's degree in divinity, and I've studied Hebrew and Greek and all that. I've read all kinds of books and love to read. I'm a big nerd, and I like school and that kind of stuff. Listen, that's who I am. And sometimes people come to me and like, Jeremy, I just want to study eschatology and premillennial dispensationalism, and I want to study soteriology and Calvinism and Arminianism, and I want to dive into all of that, and I want to know if Daniel and the 70 weeks of 7, and I want to study all that. And listen, all that's so cool, and all that's interesting. And all that's so deep, and for thousands of years Christians haven't been able to figure it out. I don't know that what makes us think that we're going to figure it out, but here's the thing that I want you to understand. Every time someone talks to me about wanting to study those like embarrassingly difficult things that we've found in Scripture, do you want to know what I keep kind of wanting to come back to? I keep wanting to come back to, hey, how about we love our enemies and pray for those that persecute us? If we could figure this out, just the thing that's crystal clear. Do you want to know what's been clear to me in 17 years of ministry? We are educated way beyond our ability to obey. We know a lot more than what we're able to keep up with. What if we just started with this? Love your enemy and pray for those that persecute us. What would it look like? Jesus tells us. He continues on and he says this. Then, that you, verse 45, that you may be children of your Father in heaven, meaning that at that point you'll start to become like God. Who, he says, causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and he sends out rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Have you ever looked at somebody that wasn't living their life according to any of the standards of God, and you see them and they're blessed financially, they're blessed with their family, they seem to just be blessed from a business standpoint, from a worldly standpoint, they seem to have all the toys and all the stuff, and you know that they're just not living right, you know that they're doing things that are just ungodly, and you struggle with that. I had a friend when we lived in Texas, good friend of mine, and she had a sister, an older sister, that while she was in seminary had gotten pregnant by a guy that wasn't her husband, and she wasn't married, and she had this baby, and it was so thankful for that child, but it didn't happen the way that anyone had ever wanted it to happen. It didn't happen by any kind of standard that God had set up or any of those sorts of things. And then my friend who kind of saved herself for marriage and did what she was supposed to do, and then struggled for 3 years with infertility. And she would come and she'd sit in our house and we would cry together and we'd pray together and she would go, but my sister didn't do it right. And God blessed her. And I've done everything God's ever asked of me and He won't give this to me. Have you ever struggled with that? Have you ever struggled with that where you look at people that just don't seem to be doing it the way that God asked them to do, and yet God seems to bless them? Let me tell you what this verse addresses. This is so big. It says that what God does is that God brings good stuff to people that care about it and people that don't care about it. God brings good stuff to the good, and He brings good stuff to the bad. Here's the phrase I want you to go home with. You ready? People matter to God, whether or not God matters to them. People matter to God, whether or not God matters to them. And so when He looks at you and goes, love your enemy, He goes, that's because that's what I did. When He says, pray for those that persecute you, listen, I set the example for that on the cross. Come on. People matter to God, whether or not God matters to them, and therefore, people should matter to us, whether or not God matters to them or not. People should matter to us whether or not we have the same values or not. People should matter to us simply because God made them in His image. Simply because God has ascribed value to them. So that's what God has done for you, so you need to do the same. Verse 46, it says, if you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Now, we're not even the tax collectors doing that. And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? This is what Jesus is going. He's listen. If you just want to love people that are like you, you don't have to love God to do that, right? Do you know what evil people do? They love people that pay back. Do you know what evil people do? They love people that are going to scratch their back. And they hang out with those people, and they are with those people, and they will bless those people, and they will give those people, and those people are going to be their friends because they look like them, sound like them, vote like them, and smell like them, and do go to the places that they go, and do all of those things. They're just like them. Even tax collectors, even sinners do that. Jesus says, please don't be like that. In fact, He would take it the next step. He said, I need you to do what no one else would do. I need you to go out and love the people that don't look like you. I need you to go out and love the people that don't vote like you, that don't sound like you, that don't even hold the same values as you, that aren't even believers. I want you to go out and I want you to love those people. I want you to pray for those people. I want you to engage those people, whether or not God matters to them or not, because they matter to God. And then Jesus concludes this little section with maybe the most offensive thing He said yet. Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. It's so offensive. Do you want to know why it's offensive? Does that mean that I can be sinless? Does that mean, Jeremy, that I can somehow be perfect? Is that what He's saying? No. He's not saying you're going to be sinless. You know you're going to be sinless. Come on. He's saying that you're always going to sin. All of sin and fallen short of the glory of God. We know that there's no way in that way we can be holy or set apart or perfect like God is. Now, what He is saying is this. When it comes to the way we treat other people, the way we love other people, the way we engage other people, yes, we can be perfect as God is perfect. We can love the way that God loves. We can serve the way that God serves. And we can move out of our holy huddles on Sunday mornings. We can do more than just write a check because that's an easy thing to do. And we can take a step out of the walls of our church and we can engage in the world. We can love people whether or not they love us. And we can ascribe value to people because God has made them in His image. And we can fight for justice and we can fight for what's right because that's what God has done for us. That's what our veterans did for us. And they did it not because it was a uniquely American value. They did it because it was a Christian value. It was a Jesus thing. And so for next week, we are going to unleash you out of these walls. We're going to launch you out of this room here today into our community, and we're going to ask you to go find those people that may not look like you or dress like you or sound like you from the different side of the tracks from you. Maybe their skin color is different than you, whatever it may be. And we want you to go, and we want you to volunteer, and we want you to serve. Our goal for the give was $39.95 for every man, woman, and child that attended Crosswind Church. Our goal for the serve is 1 hour of community service for every man, woman, and child that is in our church. 1 hour. Now, listen, let me tell you how big that is. If we do that, if we pull that off, somewhere between 500 and 600 hours of community service will take place over the next 3 weeks. Can you realize how big that is? That if 40 hours in a week is full-time, you're talking more than 10 full-time employees that are going to be unleashed into various nonprofits all over Northwest Tennessee. Those are the things that can make a difference in our community. Serving those people who so desperately need to be served. So how can you get involved? I want to tell you how you can figure out where to go serve. We've created some opportunities for you. First of all, you can take a peek at IamCrosswind.com. IamCrosswind.com. It's a website we're super proud of. We're always trying to update it. IamCrosswind.com came about 3 years ago when we decided to help great organizations in our community, some of them nonprofits, some of them for-profit, that are just doing amazing work. And so we sat down with them, we got all the contact information, how can you serve, what can you do, who do we need to talk to if we want to serve, and we put it all in one place, IamCrosswind.com. And so if you're interested in like food pantries or clothes closets, if you're interested in domestic violence help, if you're interested in feeding the hungry, if you're interested in drug situation, helping people come out of drug abuse and substance abuse. If you're interested in any of those ideas, there's places you can go on that website. If you're interested in helping with the elderly, we have nursing homes and assisted living facilities that are on this list. And you can go and check that out, and it tells you a way that you can give, a way you can serve, a way you can love for every one of these organizations. And if you want to serve, you want to volunteer, all you have to do is make a phone call and go, hey, I want to help. And they'll say, come on. And you know what's great? You may organize a warehouse. You may build a house. You may sort through some clothes. You may stock a food pantry. You may stock bags to give away for Thanksgiving. You may go shopping with a family for Christmas. There's all sorts of things that you can do depending on what it is that you feel. And we're asking every home group to go and serve somewhere together in the next handful of weeks. Okay? We're wanting you to go serve in the group, but if you're not a part of a group, that's awesome. You should be a part of a group. But if you're not, you can go serve with your family. You can go serve by yourself. You can go anywhere on those lists. And here's the other part. You may know of other places that we don't know. Right? You may know more than the 24 or so that we have on IamCrosswind.com. That's totally cool. Find somebody who's doing great work, partner with them, and go and volunteer your time. Right? And here's the secret. Here's my agenda. My goal is that you kind of get a taste for it in your 1 hour that you're doing for Be Rich, and you want to get back. That's my goal. My goal is that it turns into something that you do monthly, quarterly, annually, where you go back and you continue to serve for some of these great areas. Now, another way you can get involved is we've created some very specific events. There's some cool things that are going on in and around our community. It's Thanksgiving time. So things like feeding of the 5,000. We'll be serving a meal on November the 20th, passing out Thanksgiving baskets. We'll be packing Thanksgiving baskets with the Ministerial Association for the next few weeks. We've got Times for Charity that's coming up. And so if you'll follow Crosswind Church on our Facebook page, follow our page, like our page, right? Then what happens is we'll start putting up events. Here's a time and a place where you can go serve, and all you have to do is show up. Right? So we'll be putting those events out on Facebook. IamCrosswind.com, and then follow our Facebook events. And then once you go serve, we want you to log your hours. Here's why. Just like I was able to stand up here, Rachel was able to stand up here earlier and say, this is how much we've given. We want to be able to stand up in the weeks that are ahead and say, here's how many hours that you've served, right? And we want to be able to celebrate what God has done in and through Crosswind Church, okay? So it's not a bragging thing. We just want to celebrate what God is doing. So we want you to log your hours. There's 2 ways you can do it. On the Crosswind app, it's one-stop shopping for everything Crosswind, the app. You go to the app, hit on the Connect tab, log your hours. There's instructions there on how to do that. But if you're a little more analog, right? The app is just a little too much for you, right? And we have cards at the Welcome Center that you can pick up, fill that out, drop that back off at the Welcome Center so we can keep up with who's serving and where. Does that make sense? One last thing I want to ask of you before we finish up today is we want you to post photos. We want you to get photos of you serving. We want a group photo afterwards. We want all of those things because we want to be able to see what it is that you're doing. Now, here's where the pushback comes, right? Because I know you all are humble people. You're like, oh, Jeremy, I don't know that I want people knowing what I'm doing. Let me tell you, this is not unprecedented. This is actually biblical. In Matthew chapter 4 or chapter 5, the same passage, the same chapter we were reading earlier, Jesus says this, in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So we're going to post pictures so that we can see your good deeds and glorify God in heaven. All right? And the way we're going to find them is you're going to use these hashtags. Hashtag I am Crosswind and hashtag Gift Serve Love. You can post them on Facebook or Instagram or both. And that's how we're going to find these pictures. I just want to, just be honest with you, I just want to show up every morning and start and search that hashtag and see what y'all are doing. Like, it's kind of a selfish kind of thing. I just want to be able to celebrate. But if you'll post those photos, so here's what I want you to find a place to serve. Every man, woman, and child. I want you to log those hours so we can celebrate how many hours we've impacted in our community. And then we want you to post photos celebrating what it is that we're doing here. Because every person, regardless of their station in life, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of what it is they've done, regardless of what they believe, regardless of what side of the political aisle they sit on, they all have value. If we are going to love as God has loved us, then we've got to take a step out of our walls, a step into their world, and serve as God has served us. Let me pray. God, I am so gracious for the fact that you set us the example of serving through your Son, Jesus Christ. I am amazed that you have now offered to partner with us to love those people that are so different from us. God, I thank you that you taught us. Thank you that you taught us that people matter to you whether or not you matter to them. And I pray that you now help us to put into practice this incredibly difficult truth, to love our enemies. Pray for those who persecute us. God, I pray to help us to be like you. Pray to help us take the love of Christ to the world, so that your kingdom may be advanced, that your name may be made famous, and that you might receive all the glory and honor for all of it. Now do these things in and through us. We love you. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. See you guys next week. Hartford.